Our next speaker is Dr. JIANG Chaoyi from China. He will speak on decoding China's perspective on cyber warfare. Dr. Jiang.
Well, thank you, Professor Huang. Okay, shall I start? Yeah, firstly, I would really like to thank the Chinese Society of International Law, especially Professor Huang and Professor Yi, for organizing this panel and inviting me as a junior scholar to participate in this quite academically stimulating dialogue. My topic for today is China's perspectives on cyber warfare. So the normative rivalry, as mentioned by the previous speakers, over cyber warfare is rather old wine in a new bottle, because the key divergences remain centered around the classic considerations of sovereign equality, non-intervention, and national security. However, the new bottle is made of digital materials beyond the reach of many developing countries, where there are noticeable shortages of internet and telecommunication infrastructure, technical personnel, and cyber military stress. So for them, or maybe for all of us, it is difficult to anticipate the exact contents and cost of commitments, given the uncertainties arising from the technological and geopolitical developments. In addition to the digital gap between the developed and developing countries, there are other concerns reinforcing the uncertainty of applying existing law to cyberspace, including the declining government power in cyberspace, the privatization of cyberspace, and the rise of non-state actors. Therefore, for whoever considers its country as relatively disadvantageous, making specific commitment to something closely related to their country's survival probably is not wise at this moment, regardless whether such commitments are made by reaffirming the applicability of existing law or creating new laws through reinterpretation or treaty making. Largely due to the similar concerns shared by the majority countries, China has adopted a general stance on applicable law governing cyber warfare. China has accepted in principle the general applicability of relevant international law to cyberspace, but it has maintained that international lawmaking is demanded to address the issue that cannot be adequately dealt with by existing just at balance and just in parallel, but without specifying which issues and why. So this interesting strategic ambiguity drove me to explore possible explanations for China's concerns over the adequacy of existing just in balance and just at balance to address cyber warfare, especially the rules on cyber attacks governed by just in battle, dual use infrastructure and war-sustaining facilities targetability, the proportionality of cyber attacks against the key infrastructure, and the targetability of certain categories of civilians. After examining the political or practical grounds supporting China's views on the four issues of rules, I found that China's resistance to applying some rules of international humanitarian law to cyberspace is largely in line with the wait-and-see approach of most states regarding how to address controversies over how specific rules should be interpreted and applied to cyber operations. So from the perspective of protecting civilians and their properties in an armed conflict, there are pros and cons of resorting to cyber force. And China's own stance on the applicability of specific IHL rules to cyberspace has been evolving, as is demonstrated by its gradual acceptance of the applicability of existing just in battle and just at battle in principle. Sovereign control of cyberspace now has been increasingly reviving, and the focus of international legal discourse has shifted from the military paradigm concentrated on these two wartime regions to the prism of general rules of international law governing state behavior in peacetime, particularly rules governing state responsibility for illegal cyber operations below the threshold. As a matter of fact, by far, most documented cyber actions taken by states have fallen short of the use of force threshold. So the current landscape of international law's identification and development reflects and underpins both the concerns of China and many other like-minded states like Russia. While the heavily criticized Tallinn Manual rules serve only as one of the early efforts, rather than a concluding remark of ongoing international legal discourse. But there are two residual concerns of China not reflected in the mainstream state practice. One is to build up consensus for a treaty regulating uses of cyber force under the United Nations framework. And the other is to protect its domestic regulatory power over cyberspace from being bound by disfavored emergent or existing law. As with the first goal, there are several factors jointly rendering the goal infeasible at this moment, including the long-standing controversies over the preconditions for the commencement of self-defense and the limitations to the exercise of this right, the limited degree of compliance with general prohibition of use of force in practice, the lack of political will among not only major cyber powers, but also the weaker cyber-armed states for a taboo on use of cyber force, as well as the limitations of the normative approach by itself in deterring the abuse and misuses of force in cyberspace. And China has already softened its stance against alleged militarization of cyberspace. But due to the lack of visibility of the first goal, the importance of the second residual goal seems salient. And 2011 was a watershed year, witnessing China's transformation from a low-key and passive participant of early international normative endeavors, such as early rounds of UNGGE, to a proactive leader. This was partially prompted by the Western critiques of China's regulation of the content of and access to Internet. In 2011, the submission of the ICCIS to the United Nations General Assembly, along with other parallel normative efforts in other forums, such as the World Conference on International Telecommunications, marked the formal presence of Russian-China camp. This camp has advanced a sovereignty-based model of internet governance, which respects the cyberspace sovereignty and state independence, and legitimizes domestic efforts to regulate the content and access to information. While the US and EU camp does not accept the proposal of ICCIS, especially the domestic sovereign control in cyberspace, regulation on the freedom of expression association, and the move towards greater government control, it seeks to maintain the currently dominant multi-stakeholder model governed by diverse stakeholders on equal footing, including governments, technical communities, private sector, and other civil society members. At the core of this contention between two camps is how to draw the lines between the realms of domestic law and international law as consensual erosion of state sovereignty to be applied equally to all states. Currently, amid the rising trend of global revival of cyber sovereignty and the broadened concept of national security, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization members, including China, are no longer the regulatory minorities of cyberspace. And in the international sphere, China has employed cyber sovereignty as a shield against some unwanted rules, either emergent or probably can be invoked to use. Additionally, the Chinese government has been alarmed by the soft law norms applicable in peacetime that are proposed by some Western countries, such as relevant code of conduct on responsible state behavior in cyberspace at the 2016 and 17 UNGGE meetings. They have the potential to harden into binding law. So therefore, to prevent the coercive erosion of its sovereignty, China's strategy is to embed a firewall at the most representative democratic lawmaking forum, the General Assembly, to obstruct the convenient transplantation of power disparity from the two wartime regimes to the peacetime regimes of international law that constitute the cornerstones of an evolving global system of internet governance. Compared to the ICCIS, which tackles the peaceful coexistence problem of internet governance, China's own agenda takes one step further to cooperation, namely the vision of jointly build a community of shared future in cyberspace and the 2017 International Strategy of Cooperation on Cyberspace. In addition to continuing calling for the containing the use of force in cyberspace and calling for resolving disputes by peaceful means, the cooperative part of China's proposal rests on pushing for the making of new international cyberspace rules accepted by all states and achieving shared development, common security, joint governance, and benefits. Well, modern technology has largely shortened the time required for the formation of new international law, something like immediate customary international law. So I hope that probably the tipping point for the international community of states to reach a consensus over general control of the use of force in cyberspace and a relatively clear delimitation between the spheres of domestic law and international law will arrive soon. At least not as long as the time spent on the abolishment of profiteering. Okay, this concludes my talk. Many thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jiang, for your excellent presentation on Chinese perspectives, which give us a lot of food for thought too. Thank you.